A little while back, around the time that Season 7 of The Flash was ending, it was confirmed that the next season will be doing something different. The next season will be starting with a crossover event featuring heroes from across the Arrowverse. This is the first time they've ever done anything like this, which is have the entire crossover just be on one show. And also, it's in the beginning of the season instead of near the middle or near the mid-season break. This does maybe mean that it will be a little bit different, like maybe the Flash will be still the main character for the entire crossover, with all the other guest stars just appearing and being supporting characters as opposed to what they usually did, which is have more of an ensemble thing, or maybe like Oliver, Barry, and Kara are the main characters, but also whenever we got to a show, it's the supporting characters of that show that would appear, and maybe they would appear in other episodes, but this time it seems like Team Flash will be featured in all of these episodes, and Barry will probably remain the main character for all 5 of them. Regardless, it is still technically a crossover event, and the first one that we've gotten since Crisis on Infinite Earths over a year and a half ago. There's never been really over a year, a little bit more than a year between crossovers ever since they started them, and that's only because of the coronavirus that we haven't gotten a crossover till now, so it's a pretty big deal that we are now getting one. And we also know a lot of details about it. We know the cast of characters that have already been confirmed, we know the main villain, and we know the name of the crossover, and the name of the crossover is Armageddon. Ever since Invasion, every single crossover's name has taken at least a bit of inspiration from the comics. Flash vs. Arrow and Heroes Join Forces were completely original titles, but there was Invasion, which is based off of Invasion, Crisis on Earth X, which takes its title at least from Crisis on Earth X, Elseworlds, which takes its title from the publication Elseworlds, which is like What If for DC, and then Crisis on Infinite Earths, which was probably the most direct adaptation that the Arrowverse had, based off of Crisis on Infinite Earths. Now, Armageddon is also something from the comics, but it's actually a storyline called Armageddon 2001, which doesn't really seem to be what they're going for, but if it is at least loosely based off of it, then I'll explain what the storyline was here. So Armageddon 2001 came out in the year 1991 and mostly takes place in the year 1991 as well as in 2030, and its title is just because there was an Armageddon in 2001, which is 19 years before 2030. There's a bit of time travel involved, but basically a hero named Wave Rider from the year 2030 goes back in time to the year 1991 to stop that apocalypse or Armageddon from ever happening. The Armageddon in question is really the world being taken over by a villain named Monarch, who is actually a former villain and member of the Justice League. Turns out it's revealed that this villain is Hawk, who used to be Hawk at least, the same Hawk who was a member of the Titans on Titans, who is not a powerless vigilante in the comics. He's an avatar of the Lord of Chaos, while Dove is an avatar of the Lord of Order. Despite being an avatar of the Lord of Chaos, he still is a good guy, at least until this story. Now, in the story, it was a little bit weird that he kind of came out of nowhere as the villain, and the reason for that is because the original plan was to make Captain Atom the villain Monarch, but that was leaked, and because of the leak, DC decided to change it because they wanted the reveal to be a big surprise, so they changed it to Hawk, which was pretty controversial because it didn't really make much sense. And this isn't really a very beloved storyline. It wasn't very memorable either. It's Armageddon 2001. Nobody ever talks about it. Nobody ever says it's one of the good storylines. It's just there, and it exists. It's very overshadowed by Crisis on Infinite Earths, which came out a couple years before, or 0 Hour, which came out a couple years later. It's really just there in the middle, and doesn't really mean anything for the overall DC universe. In fact, it didn't really mean anything for Hawk either, as in 0 Hour he became a completely different character, and later he was dead for a while, came back to life, and at this point he's just Hawk again. He's a hero, so this is a very inconsequential storyline, and it's probably also inconsequential for the crossover, as I don't really think they're adapting this at all, instead just taking the name Armageddon because it's a cool name. So that was pretty damn complicated, so let's get back to the actual crossover event, and we do have a bit of a description for this, which again does not really sound like the storyline at all. The crossover is described, and this is paraphrasing obviously, but a powerful alien threat comes to Earth, which leads to a fierce battle with Team Flash. Team Flash prove rather unequipped to fight the battle on their own, so they call in the reinforcements of the B-list Justice League. I say B-list Justice League because that's really what there is. There's a single A-lister on the team, and that's the Flash. And even from the Arrowverse, most of the heavy hitters aren't there. There's no Superman, there's no Supergirl, there's no Martian Manhunter, there's no Legends, and if we're talking about the Justice League from the comics, there's obviously no Green Lantern or Aquaman or Wonder Woman or Batman. The heroes that have been confirmed so far include the Atom, which is actually Ray Palmer, which is pretty exciting because he left Legends a while back and the actor didn't really like his send-off, so maybe he's going to get a better one here. There's also Ryan Choi, who might have a storyline relating to Ray Palmer. There's Batwoman, but not even the Kate Kane version, the Ryan Wilder version. There's Black Lightning, Mia Queen, aka the Green Arrow, as well as Alex Danvers, aka Sentinel. And also Damien Dark and the Reverse Flash, played by Tom Cavanaugh, are going to be involved somehow as well. There's one more character confirmed, but I'll get to him later since he is the main villain. But for now, I wanted to talk about this very underwhelming looking Justice League. Honestly, my first reaction to seeing this group of heroes was, that's it? That's really what we're getting here? There's no Supergirl, there's no Martian Manhunter, Brainiac 5, or Dreamer, there's no Superman or Steel, there's no current Legends, there's no John Diggle continuing his Green Lantern story, and I really expected for the next crossover to also include the Stargirl characters and have some sort of crossover with Earth 2. We don't have any of those characters. We really just have old heroes who we haven't seen in a while. We have characters like the Atom, Ryan Choi, and Mia Queen who we haven't seen since the last crossover, or like around that time, or heroes whose shows have ended like Black Lightning and Alex Danvers, but for some reason the other heroes from the shows aren't appearing. There's also Batwoman, who's really the only character who is a character on a current show that is still around. And I don't include Alex Danvers in that because by the crossover, by the time that comes out, Supergirl will have ended. This lineup might be incomplete, like maybe they're going to announce other heroes later on, maybe to build the hype. That is what they did with Crisis on Infinite Earths. But for now, it does seem like a very bare bones, very minimum, and very underwhelming version of the Justice League. But maybe that's what they're going for. Maybe they're trying to use this crossover to tie up some loose ends and give certain heroes their proper endings that they might not have gotten on their own respective shows. Excluding Batwoman, since her show is still continuing after this, there is Ray, whose departure from Legends was a bit controversial and Brandon Routh was not happy with it, but also it was kind of lame. At the same time, there's Ryan Choi, who appeared in Crisis on Infinite Earths, but then he was there, he didn't become the Atom. That was so weird. So maybe they're going to use this crossover, and this is the perfect opportunity to tie up a Ray Palmer storyline and at the same time have him pass the torch to Ryan Choi, and maybe finally Ryan Choi can become the Atom, maybe join the Legends, maybe get his own TV show, which I would not be opposed to, but at least we would have that ending for the character and the beginning for Ryan Choi. So Green Arrow and the Canaries obviously was never picked up, so Mia Queen's storyline was never resolved. I thought that they maybe could have moved the storyline over to Legends of Tomorrow or a tie-in comic, but resolving it in the crossover definitely works as well, works to resolve that storyline, but also as the final appearance of Mia Queen, because the last one, obviously, it ended on a cliffhanger, and that just doesn't work as the ending for such a big character. Then there's Black Lightning, whose show ended rather uneventfully. I mean, it just ended. There was no news. It wasn't connected to any special event. Nobody died. Nothing special or big happened. Jefferson just defeated Tobias Whale and then retired from vigilantism yet again. Basically, since Season 1, the only time Black Lightning was ever talked about was his appearance in Crisis on Infinite Earths. So giving another separate ending in this crossover that is a little bit more news compared to his actual ending might be their only chance to give Black Lightning an actual, something that people care about, an ending that people will talk about and people will see. And then there's Alex Danvers being the only Supergirl character to appear, which is weird because there's a lot of other Super Friends that I would much rather see. Supergirl probably will be getting an ending, so she probably won't appear after this, but there is also Martian Manhunter and Dreamer and Guardian and Brainiac 5, all of whom I would rather see than Alex Danvers because they're actual heroes, and they're a lot more interesting than just Alex, who has a gun, really. Now, we don't know the circumstances of the ending of Supergirl, which will probably explain the absence of Supergirl, Martian Manhunter, and the rest, but maybe the Supergirl writers didn't want to give Alex an ending in their own show because it would be inevitably overshadowed by Kara's, so they left that unresolved so that they can end it in the crossover event. Which makes sense, but it begs the question, where are the rest of the characters? Where is Martian Manhunter, and where is Dreamer and Brainiac 5? I mean, at least Martian Manhunter also deserves a proper ending. Maybe he is going to be returning. I would love to see him on Superman and Lois at some point, but I do think that if Alex Danvers deserves her own ending that isn't overshadowed by Supergirl, then John Jones does as well. Basically, my main point behind what I've been talking about up until now is that most of the heroes, barring Batwoman, are characters who don't really have a place in the Arrowverse as of right now, or as of the point the crossover will air. A bunch of characters whose shows ended, they left their shows abruptly, or there's Ryan Choi who was just in Crisis on Infinite Earths, and that is it. So they're using this crossover to resolve all of those storylines and give proper endings, or maybe even beginnings, to a bunch of characters who didn't have good endings or good beginnings. That being said, though, I think the crossover, it looks a little bit lame in terms of the Justice League, and we need more A-listers. Superman, Martian Manhunter, and Green Lantern, or the John Diggle Green Lantern at the very least, were kind of a must, and we really needed to see them for this crossover. Plus, I mean, there's a huge alien threat coming to Earth, and Team Flash calls in their allies, and somehow Superman doesn't show up. That just doesn't make any sense. I mean, they'd really have to really explain, or maybe show on Superman and Lois why he's not there. He's busy in like a different dimension or in a different universe, or he's out in outer space or something like that, as there aren't really a lot of big things that he could be doing on Earth that would prevent him from joining in. That being said, it's probably a good thing that Superman isn't showing up, just because Superman being there, he would just completely overshadow the Flash if they wrote him the same that they write him on Superman and Lois and the Flash on the Flash. Then Superman would completely overshadow him in every regard, and he would probably kick Despero's ass. That's right, Despero is going to be the main villain of Armageddon. So who is Despero? Well, he's actually one of the very first and most iconic Justice League villains, despite not really being in much of anything. Starro was actually the first Justice League villain, because the Justice League debuted in the Brave and Bold number 28, but just 3 issues later they got their own series, Justice League of America, and issue 1 featured Despero as the main villain. In that issue, the main hero that he actually went up against was the Flash, so that definitely fits within this crossover. Initially, Despero was an alien from a planet named Kalinor, I think that's how you call it, and he was the ruler of Kalinor. He wasn't really physically powerful, but he did have psychic and mind control powers. Later on, they did change one key aspect of the character, making him incredibly powerful physically, and then because of that, he was capable of taking on the entire Justice League all at once, obviously including Superman. And combine that with his mind control and psychic powers, he was basically one of Justice League's most fearsome foes. For some reason, he's never appeared in live action and never really used as a major villain in anything, any animated show or animated movie, but he does have a few animated appearances in a couple shows like Justice League, Batman the Brave and the Bold, and Young Justice. Despero's main motivation usually is that he wants to conquer other worlds, and Earth is obviously always one of them. In Young Justice, he was also a character who wanted to go to other worlds challenging their champions, and apparently he defeated over 90 of them before getting to Earth, where he obviously lost. In Young Justice, despite that added bit of motivation, he was a very boring character since he didn't talk. Instead, his robot talked for him, and that robot was a bit annoying. So I'm hoping for the show and the crossover, they go for a more talkative and more personality-based character. Maybe a character who is similar to Thanos. I mean, they both are very purple and very large aliens. Now, Despero is a CGI character, probably. Either they're going to use CGI or they're going to use practical effects, and either way, I don't really think he's going to end up looking good. I mean, Despero can look good in a big budget, like where if a big budget movie did him, or even like Superman and Lois. But I mean, looking at the last CGI creatures they had on The Flash, I don't really have a lot of faith that Despero will end up looking good. Not only that, but he is a very naturally goofy character, and you put a character like that on The Flash, which has awful writing recently, and it's safe to say that my expectations for this character, well, they're quite low. I'm expecting a bad interpretation of the character just because of the reputation, basically because of The Flash Season 7. I mean, what I'm expecting right now, since it's the exact same people creating next season, I'm expecting a character who looks like Fuerza, I'm expecting a character who has the same level of dialogue as Godspeed, and a character who's just as threatening and imposing as Mirror Monarch. That's really what I'm expecting, because The Flash Season 7 is... It's just god-awful, and Despero is a tall order, and I don't really think they're going to pull it off, but who knows, maybe they will in the end, and maybe they'll get some help from Superman and Lois, or maybe over the course of the break between Season 7 and 8, they figured out how to make a good TV show, and how to allocate their resources well. But for now, I'm not expecting that. I'm expecting a bad villain, but maybe the crossover itself could be good regardless. Let me know in the comments down below what you think about the upcoming crossover Armageddon, which premieres November 16th, 2021, with the first 5 episodes of Season 8 of The Flash.